Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Leslie. This is where I share about birth, faith, and family. I am a childbirth doula. So to check out what that is, I'll go ahead and link my video on what is a doula here for you to check that out. I'm continuing my series today sharing about how to have a joyful birth experience. Now, the number one tip I shared this week is listening to empowering birth stories. This will help you to reframe your mind to be able to believe that a positive birth experience is possible for you, and it will help to counteract the countless negative stories that we see in media, movies, and probably have heard from people in your life. So to counteract that, I've been sharing resources this week that are places where you can hear empowering birth stories. Today I will be sharing my third resource. Now, whereas the first resource I shared, it was Birth in God's Presence podcast, which is a Christian podcast sharing births about how God showed up in different people's births, and I absolutely love it. This one's not Christian. And while this one also doesn't have a lot of stories of women birthing during COVID-19, like the second resource I share, which is Built to Birth podcast, this one does have, the reason I picked this one to also be included is because this one does have longevity and complexity. Now let me explain that. Longevity meaning there are so many birth stories. This podcast has been around the longest out of the ones that I've shared. And so there are stories here to last you days, months, definitely not something that you'd get through quickly. And so you won't run out of empowering birth stories with this podcast. Second, complexity. This podcast does a great job of covering a lot of different situations that you can be in during pregnancy and labor. And so I say that because you may be someone watching this who's been told by your primary care provider that there is some sort of complication with your labor or with your birth, and those may cause complications during labor. You may be someone who has to be induced. You may be someone who has to go has to have a scheduled C-section for whatever reason. You may be someone who has specific circumstances that may not be typical. They're not, it's not like a normal pregnancy or a normal, you're not looking at like a normal pregnancy. You may have some high risk factors or anything like that. This podcast probably has whatever it is that you are dealing with, think you may potentially deal with. This podcast probably covers it. And this podcast does a great job of doing it. So Bryn interviews women from all different walks of life, and she does a great job of really asking them, what did they do in advance of, what did they do before they got pregnant? What were they doing during their pregnancy? And how was their labor? And how was the postpartum period? Which I really like, especially because she focuses on how postpartum was, because that can be a very, very difficult time for women. And so I really like that. I also love that she interviews her sponsors in the same sort of way. So I was listening to her most recent podcast, and she had someone on speaking about a breast pump. Now, she didn't just advertise the pump, which is typical of podcasts who have sponsors, who just kind of just tell you about it and where you can find it. But she brought on a representative who spoke about the pump from her own personal experience. She interviewed her about it. She said, how was it like? What were the benefits? What were the things that were difficult about using it? It was so informative. It was like a good 10-minute segment at the end of the episode, and I absolutely loved it, because now it made me start considering maybe this is a breast pump I should look into, because listening to the woman talk about it firsthand, about how it was so great for her and how much faster it was than the typical pump. I'm like, who doesn't want a faster breast pump? And how silent it was, that her husband didn't even know that she was using it when she'd pump in the middle of the night. I'm like, that sounds amazing. I would love to have a pump that doesn't wake up my husband. All of these things I wouldn't have gotten from a typical ad about a breast pump in a podcast. And so I also like that she includes that in her podcast as well. When they're sponsored and she can bring somebody on, she interviews them in that same kind of style to give you more insight about the product and get some firsthand testimonials. I mean, come on, ladies, we know the power of testimonials. That is why I've been sharing this tip this week. Listening to empowering birth stories. Why? Because there's nothing more encouraging to get you on board to something, to try it, than to hear somebody else speak positively about it, right? And so that is why there's nothing that could help to remove fear around your labor more than listening to testimonials of other women just like you in whatever specific situation that you're in, right? Also going through this, right? And so that's what I really like about the Birth Hour podcast. And so I encourage you to check it out. You can scroll through. She does a great job of naming them according to the issues that they discuss. And so if you're looking for a particular topic, I would just encourage you to go ahead, look through, and tune in for a positive birth story to help encourage you for your own joyful birth experience. Thanks so much for tuning in. That is all I've got for today. But don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and hit that notification bell so that you get alerted about my next video. Okay, thanks so much. Have a great day, and God bless you. As always, I am praying for you and believing that you are going to have a beautiful, beautiful birth. Thanks so much. Bye.